Grace is a critical doctrine in the Christian faith. It's a critical element to life. According to the gospel of Jesus Christ, without grace, there is no life. There's no hope. There's nothing. So who gets to receive this grace? Some people would say, and in some ways it's kind of intuitive even, that grace is just unconditional. God just gives it. Matter of fact, some people will say that God gives grace almost regardless of someone's response to him or their interest in him or their view of him or whatever. God just gives grace. That is not what the Bible teaches. As a matter of fact, the very first time the word grace is used in the Bible story is in Genesis chapter 6. Genesis 6 is a story about a world that's on fire. The text says there in Genesis chapter 6 that people were so evil and so bad that every intent of the thoughts of the hearts of human beings were only evil continually. That's how bad things were. But then it says there was a man named Noah who found grace in the eyes of the Lord. If you look in verse 8 of Genesis chapter 6, Genesis 6 and verse 8, it says, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." Noah found grace, or yours might say, Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Now the question is, why did Noah receive grace? Did God just pick at random, you know what, I'm going to pick one person to show grace to in this dark period of human history? Well, the next verse continues, and it says, "These are the records of the generations of Noah. Now Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Noah walked with God." What this shows us is that not everybody received God's grace. And that Noah didn't receive it just because God unilaterally decided, hey, Noah, I'm going to show you grace. I'm going to be kind to you. I'm going to help you. God showed Noah grace because Noah was righteous. He was blameless in his time, meaning his righteousness wasn't a perfect moral record, but his righteousness was that, at least comparatively speaking, he really was oriented toward God. He was really seeking after God. That's what's qualified in the next statement. It's not even that he was just slightly better than everybody else in his culture because he was a nicer person naturally, but he was actually seeking God. Noah walked with God. Grace is conditional. Grace is conditional. And if you question that, I'll just reiterate to you, this is the first time the word grace is used in the Bible, and it very specifically highlights the fact that there's a reason why this man received grace, that he was seeking God. He was righteous. He was blameless. He walked with the Lord. Look at another passage in Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3 is another text that shows this truth that grace is conditional. It's not something that's for everyone, and it's not something that God just unilaterally decides to give to people. Grace is conditional depending on how we live our lives. Proverbs chapter 3, listen to what the proverb writer says. Proverbs chapter 3, starting in verse 32. It says, "The devious are an abomination to the Lord, but God is intimate." Grace shows grace of his presence and his love and his concern, his interest. Who is he intimate with? The upright. Verse 33, "The curse of the Lord is on the house of the wicked." People who behave wickedly, God curses those people. "But he blesses with grace the dwelling of the righteous." And then verse 34, the most explicit one here. "Though God scoffs at the scoffers," people who say, there's no God, I hate God, he's stupid, whatever. God says, okay, fine. If you want to be that way, I can play that game too. But he gives grace to the humble, or yours might say, the afflicted. You see the point in all these texts? Grace is conditional. And if you still are sitting there and you're like, well, that's all Old Testament stuff. That's before Jesus came around, so it doesn't count. It counts. Because Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 8 says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith." Through faith. It's not that God just decides to show grace to whoever he wants to or something like that. Salvation is by grace through faith. That's the condition. Grace is conditional. So, 2 questions you need to consider. Number 1, do you want to be blessed by God? Do you want to be rescued from a world that's on fire by God? Do you want God to show you favor, to be intimate with you, to help you, to bless you, to love you, to care for you, to watch out for you, to listen to you? Do you want that? Do you want grace from God? If the answer is yes, then you need to seek him. You need to trust in him. You need to listen to him. You need to obey him so that you can receive his grace. And it's not that you're earning it. The conditionality of grace does not imply that we earn God's grace or we in some way deserve it. We don't. Grace is a gift. But like every gift, you have to actually receive it. And too many of us live in a way that's so selfish and self-centered and stubborn that we never open ourselves up to receive God's grace. No, we can never deserve God's grace, but God's grace is conditional on you opening yourself up with humility and righteousness and walking with him and serving him and loving him and listening to him. That's how you open yourself up to receive the gift of God's grace. What do you need to change? What do you need to be? What do you need to do in order to open your heart up to receive the grace of God? He wants to give it if you want to receive it.